Hello, Somerset Church, and welcome to our Sunday online experience. We are so grateful that despite our COVID circumstances, God is still providing a way for us to connect with you. We believe God has a powerful word for you today. As we begin, why don't you grab the link below and share it with a friend, a coworker, a family member, or anyone in your network that could use some hope and encouragement today. And if you're new with us today, our heart is for you to get connected. And the best way to do that is through our CS Meetup. Check it out. Each month, we'll be hosting a casual but intentional virtual hangout with our pastors. Go ahead and text CS Meetup to 97,000 right from your phone to get connected. All right, church, as we jump into our worship experience, let's stand to our feet as we prepare our hearts, as we lean into worship and invite the presence of God in. I'll see you right after.
Yeah. Thank you for worshiping with us this morning. I just want you to wherever you are, just lift your hands. It's a posture of surrender to a faithful God. Yeah. Walking around these walls. Give it to him, yeah. I thought by now they'd fall. For you have never failed me yet. Listen. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won. For you have never failed me yet. Sometimes we gotta say that in faith. Oh, your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Faithfulness, yeah. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never failed me yet. Oh, you never failed, God. Stay in the battle, stay in the battle. He's right there with you, yeah. Oh, I know the night won't last. Will come to pass. My heart will sing your praise again. Oh Jesus, Jesus, you're still enough. Oh, so keep me within your love. Yeah. My heart will sing your praise again. 'Cause I know, hey, your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. And I'm still in his hands, I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never failed me yet, God. 'Cause you never failed me. He promised that he'll never leave us or forsake us. And you could bank on it. Yeah. Say it. I believe. I seen you move. I seen you move. I seen you. Hey, sing it out. Come on. Say, I seen you move. You move the mountains, and I is still. He's faithful. He's faithful. And you're still in his hands. What can pluck us out of his hands? Nothing. I'm convinced that nothing can separate us from the love of God. You never fail me. Your promise is great is your faithfulness. Your faithfulness. I'm still. And this is my confidence. You've never failed me yet. 'Cause you never will, and you never will, you never will. Declare it over your home. Declare it over your body. He's never failed you, and he never will. You gotta declare it. I've seen you move the mountains. And I believe I'll see you do it again. Made a way when there was no way. And I believe I'll see you do it again. I've seen you move, God. You move the mountains. And I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way when there was no way. And I believe I'll see you do it again. I'll see you do it again. Oh, Jesus, I'll see you do it again. I'll see you do it again. Do it again. Do it again. Never changes.
Oh, come on.
Never shifts. Oh, he's the same yesterday, today, forevermore. Today, forevermore. He never changes.
Give it up for that amazing worship. Come on. I hope you're prepared and encouraged for what God has for us today through part 3 of our collection of talks. Before we get started, I want to remind you our fall season of CS groups are ready for you to join. At Centerset, you can belong before you believe, but know that we are better together. Step out in faith and head on over to our website and sign up for our virtual group today. We have a community who wants to grow in community with you. Hey, listen, if you're new here today, know that we don't pass on passion, and something that we're passionate about is the opportunity to connect with you in our CS Meetup. Each month, we'll be hosting our virtual meet and greet. This is an opportunity for you to connect with our pastors in an intimate setting. How awesome is that? Go ahead and text CS Meetup to 97,000 right from your phone to sign up. All right, church, we want to give a loud and bold Centerset welcome to our virtual executive pastor, Pastor Lee Coate. Grab your pen and your notebook. Trust me, you're going to want to take notes today.
Well, hey, Centerset Church, so glad to have an opportunity to introduce myself to you and to be a part of our worship gathering today. I so love your team, your pastors, and love just what God is up to. And I know we've been in the middle of challenging times, but we have continued to gain ground in this season, and we look forward to such an incredible future. Well, today we get to wrap up a series that we've been talking about finance, money, and generosity. And I get to kind of land the plane today. So we're going to go in all different directions. Got a few props for you, but I trust that not only will you be convicted as necessary, but that you will also be ready and willing to be more generous and more impactful with the resources that God gives us. Well, you've all probably experienced the cloud. You may just not know it by that name. Let me help you understand. It most often occurs when you're on vacation. You see, one of our family's favorite destinations as our kid was growing up was Disneyland. I mean, a lot of people do that. We would try to make it a yearly event. But as you know, Disney is not built for bargain hunters. And so usually a day or so into our trip, maybe even as we're standing in the churro line for the 5th time, paying $10 for some dough and cinnamon sugar, it's then that the cloud will begin to roll in. My wife usually notices it first, hovering over me. It's that look of panic on my face. It's the dark cloud that says, we are spending money we don't have and definitely shouldn't be spending. You see, we had planned all the details of the trip, but what we had failed to do is actually put together an intentional plan for our finances that would be required on this trip. And so now the entire experience is clouded by that sense of doom, and what was supposed to be a time of fun and relaxation and even peace, it quickly becomes a place of panic. Maybe for you, the cloud doesn't hit in that Disney sort of way. Perhaps it shows up as you're walking the lot of the car dealership, or you're sitting at the table at that "we don't belong here, it's too expensive" restaurant, or even waiting in the long lines with your overflowing cart at Costco. That may be for you when the cloud rolls in. So I want to tell you something that probably nobody is telling you, and you're going to be really glad today that I let you in on this secret. It's usually why that financial cloud shows up in your life. Here it is. There is a big difference between your standard of living and your quality of life. Let me repeat that. There's a big difference between your standard of living and your quality of life. You see, every single day, you and I are inundated with advertisements and marketing telling you these two things, quality of life and standard of living, are the same. They tell you, if I raise my standard of living, I drive a better car, I dress in better clothes, I vacation in better spots, I eat in nicer places. Or if I do that, if everything I have is upgraded or shinier, I will have a better quality of life. That is absolutely not true. It's a lie. In fact, if we were honest, some of you are not enjoying the quality of your life, and you actually have a higher standard of living than you have ever had before. There is not a greater amount of peace in your home. Your standard of living has gone up, 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 up. It's been raised throughout the years, but you don't get along any better. In fact, you may argue about money and stuff all the time, and you have more stuff and maybe more money than you've ever had, and you're not even enjoying it. Why? I just said it. Because there's a difference between standard of living and quality of life. Here's the deal. You can raise today, right now, you can raise your standard of living with debt. That's right. We all know how quickly that can get out of control. But you raise your quality of life with discipline. And too many of us, I'm afraid, have loved debt more than discipline. Don't ever confuse these two things, because there is a God, and He cares deeply about you, and He even knows your name. And what would you guess that God is more concerned about? Your standard of living or your quality of life? And if you're a Christian, you believe He sent His Son into the world to give His life for you. What do you think He's more interested in? Your standard of living or your quality of life? Let me ask it this way. If you're married, what would you rather have? An awesome marriage or a horrible marriage with a bunch of cool cars? Now, some of you have tried that. You've got an awesome house, cool cars, lots of toys. But if you don't even like to go home. Some of you, again, you probably make more money than you have ever made before. You make more money than you have ever made before, probably more than you've ever imagined you would make, and yet you have no peace. You're hearing me today, and you have no peace. When we start to talk about finances, and Pastor Ali's talking about finances, you start to get anxious. Why is that? Because you have probably fallen for a lie. And it's not the advertiser's fault or the marketer's fault. It's your fault, and it's my fault. You've been deceived. That's right. Lynn Twist, she wrote a fascinating book called The Soul of Money, in which she says the following: money has only the power we assign to it. And she goes on to say, and we have assigned it immense power. We have created a money monster. So today, as we wrap this up, we're going to flip on the light. And you and I are going to confront this money monster head on again, so we can take responsibility for where we are today and discover what I call the power of margin. And I want to show you in just a second what I call the margin chart. It's pretty simple, but before I draw, there's three things that I know about you. There's three things. The first one is this: you are living on a percentage of your income. You are. You probably don't know what it is. And I bet you have allowed life to drive you towards whatever that percentage is. All of us are living on a percentage of our income. Either it's greater than or less than 100%. Secondly, you think this: if you had a little bit more, things would be fine. How many times have you and I thought that? I mean, things are so tight, so tight. If we just had a little bit more, everything would be fine. We've all felt that way. But it's because we've never chosen a percentage to live on, and so our lifestyles have continued to match our income. And maybe you felt the same way when you made a lot less 10 years ago. And if somebody were to tell me what you're going to be making today as much as you do now, and that you were still going to feel financial pressure, you would probably have laughed. You would have said, if I could ever get to the place where I made, you fill in the blank, more than I do now, I would be golden. I'd be so happy, I'd be content, and I'd be peaceful. Yet here you are, better off with stuff than you ever were before, and yet you still feel like you're under a cloud. All right? So this is called the margin chart. And for a lot of you, you've handled your finances for a long time, and you get that. But here's the visual. Okay? Here's how this looks. On the left side is money, and the amount of money that we have or that we're making. I'm going to go slow, but here we go. On the bottom is time, and it heads this direction. This is the margin. Now, if I were to draw your income, we'll use green. We'd start over here, at the beginning of when you start to make money. You're mowing lawns or whatever you're doing. You're working at Subway, and you begin. Our hope would be, and for most of us, over time, our income would start to grow a little bit. There's seasons where it flattens out or it dips a little bit, but our trust would be as we continue to work hard and we get into handle our skills, that we continue to go up. And maybe there's a season where it goes like that. Hopefully we're not in that season right now. And this isn't necessarily like thousands of dollars, or it could be hundreds of dollars, but it's relative to your income. It's relative to where you are. And it just keeps going up, man. That would just be awesome, that our income would be that. But there's also the amount of money that we're spending. It's our expense. We're going to use red to represent that. And as we go along, this may start pretty close together, but hopefully over time, our expenses may go up a little bit. You tracking? But as we go along, hopefully our income continues to rise. And in theory, this should follow along. Now, here's the deal. The space between what we make and what we spend over time is what we call our margin. And man, this is awesome, because the more space between what we're making and what we're spending that we have, that equals peace. Because margin equals peace. And all truth is God's truth. So this is truth. But when these lines start to get together, when they start to get really close together, that equals pressure. And a lot of us today, as you're looking at this, you're thinking, yeah, Lee, I get that. And unfortunately, the line, maybe of your own doing, has gotten so close together that you're feeling so much pressure that you don't have the peace that God wants you to have. And this is when you look at your finances and you say, wow, we spent this much money, but look how much we made. We can really afford to take that vacation or replace that old car. And yes, sometimes the income sort of flattens out, but as long as you have space and you have room between, you have peace. And here's what I know about you. You want this. No matter who you are, even whether you're a Christian or not watching this today, this peace is what we all want. It's a good thing to shoot for. Why? Because you can breathe deeper, you can live free, and you can be more generous, which is important. As followers of Christ, if you're a follower of Christ, generosity is a part of that, and you will have a better quality of life. And we get this. You're not looking at me right now watching this like, Lee, you're crazy. You get it. But here's where most of us are. We are in this pressure zone. We allow our income to drive our spending. We make $30,000 a year, then we spend it. $45,000 a year, we spend it. $100K, we spend it. And here's the amazing thing. Even if you make $250K a year and your spending continues to track alongside your income, you still feel this, the pressure. And when your life is like this, you become a slave. You have purchased and borrowed your way into slavery. Money is now your master, and you have no margin. You can't buy that. You can't drive that. You can't live there. She can't go to that school. We can't go on that trip. And more importantly, listen to me, we can't give. We can't be generous. We can't push the mission of God forward. We can't live a biblical perspective of what it is to take the resources that God has given us and push it out to transform the world. Why? Because money is now your master and the pressure is continuing to mount. You can't fund your dreams and you become a slave emotionally because you worry all the time. And it will go on and on unless you finally say, enough already, and you do something about it. You know, the entire thing about living under pressure and as a financial slave is not new. In fact, Jesus predicted this over 2,000 years ago. It may surprise you, but Jesus was always talking about money because he knew that money mattered and how we used what God has given us mattered, reflected our heart. Check this out. In Luke 16, Jesus says this, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. Here's the part you got to hear. You cannot serve both God and money. Jesus makes this oh so relevant comment for us today. You cannot serve God and money. So who are you serving? If you find yourself in a situation where money is dictating things and putting pressure on you and pulling on you, you will be torn. Maybe you feel it today, Center Set. You'll feel torn between your devotion to God and your devotion to your stuff. And at the end of the day, you'll have to choose. And if money is your master because you've traded or borrowed or spent your way into slavery, then you can't even, I would argue, you can't even follow Jesus fully. But there is another way. And we find some clues to it in one of the most spiritually practical books in the Bible. We find it in the Old Testament, the book of Proverbs. I want to invite you to turn there. And in it, we glean direct wisdom from God, specifically in regards to this. And you apply these principles, and we begin to see transformation happen, and we begin to see freedom become a reality. So I want us to specifically look at Proverbs chapter 6. And we're going to find inspiration and direction from a very unlikely source, an ant. You heard me, an ant. In verse 6 of Proverbs chapter 6, we read this. Go to the ant, you sluggard, which means you lazy fool. Consider its way and be wise. It goes on to say, the ant has no commander, overseer, or ruler, yet it stores its provision in summer and gathers its food at harvest. The ant. I mean, how often do you think about ants? Maybe only when they invade your picnic at the park or your home. A few years ago, we had an ant invasion, and it was an ongoing battle that ensued for a number of weeks. And it would go something like this. We would go to bed at night antless. We would wake up in the morning, and they would be everywhere, trails in cabinets. So I would Google how to get rid of ants, and we'd try cinnamon and sprays and ant traps. It was ongoing. They were persistent. They would not let up. It was a battle. But here's the thing. Ants do something without even thinking about it. Proverbs talks about it. They have a plan. I mean, get this. Little tiny ants, they know that today's responsibility actually affects tomorrow's reality. Let me say that again. You may need to write that down. Today's responsibility actually affects tomorrow's reality. The ant knows you can't control everything. None of us, you don't know what's going to happen in the economy. You can't control any of that. But there is something you can. You can plan, you can have discipline, and then you can master your money. You can control that monster. You can take radical responsibility for that part of your life. It goes on, chapter 6, verse 9 of Proverbs says this, how long will you lie there? Now it's addressing you and I, you sluggard. When will you get up from your sleep? Oh, a little sleep, we say, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. And poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. Man, Solomon, he's not messing around when he writes this here. He is comparing anyone who is not willing, you and I, to take responsibility for the resources that God has given them and making a comparison between an ant and a fool. The ant actually has a plan, while the fool, the sluggard, makes excuses. The ant takes responsibility, while the sluggard takes a nap. Now, the question for you as you think about the ant, and the question for me as we think about the ant and the fool, is which one is actually going to have margin tomorrow? You know the answer, the ant. And which one is actually going to feel more pressure? The fool. Because we know this, and this proverb speaks to this, is no one stumbles into financial freedom. That's why people who suddenly stumble accidentally into large sums of money, they win the lottery, they inherit some large estate, so often the story is told of them crashing and burning because they had no plan. But Solomon says, look at the ant. They know what they're doing. They're not just sitting around. They're not just responding in the moment to what they want or what they see or what they need. They are putting a long-term plan into action. So listen to me. A life of financial peace and generosity, that life that you want tomorrow, depends on your discipline to follow a wise plan today. So what does that look like for you and I? I'm so glad that you asked. I have steps. Aren't you excited? 1, 2, 3, 4. And I realize nobody really lives exactly that way. Nobody walks around with a 1, 2, 3, 4 list. But I think it's important that we pull it out here and that we put it out there. Because if you'll lean into these with both your attitude and practically, I believe you can widen the gap that exists in your life and move from a place of panic to a place of peace. And then you can leverage what God has given you to push the kingdom of God forward with generosity and resource to see that kingdom expand. I actually believe that because I've had to live it. And if at the end of this you think this is just kind of lame, or you just pay attention to the first one, here's what they are. Here's the 3 of them. The plan is that you have resolve, you have routine, and a recipe. You have resolve, you make a routine, and you execute the recipe. Let's talk about each of the three of them, and then we're going to step over here for a second. First of all, resolve. That's it, resolve. It's like working out, right? Working out is really not about the difficulty most of the time. It's usually about your resolve, because nobody has to actually explain the basics of exercise and move and do those things. No one says, man, I would exercise, but I just don't know how to get started. That's not it. It's the resolve. It's saying, enough with where I am. I'm going to do something about us. Most of us probably, with our finances, really only need this step, because so many of us actually have, you could draw this chart. You have knowledge of what our finances should look like and how you could get them under control. There's a bunch of smart, sophisticated people listening today. You just need that resolve to say, I'm not going to live this way anymore. I'm not going to live in a panic with that cloud. I'm tired of it. I hope you're listening to this and this entire series, and you're getting a little frustrated. You're getting mad. You're getting fired up so that you're going to do something. And listen, when you get this kind of resolve, you actually stop blaming. You stop blaming the government, a president, a prior president, the economy, your boss. You stop blaming everybody else. You say, it's my life. It's my decisions. Life isn't perfect. It's unpredictable. But I'm going to start living with the resolve that will open up this space between what I make and what I spend. That's resolve. Now, here's the second step. Your decision, your resolve, must be accompanied by a commitment to a routine. Write this down. Routine is the gasoline on the fires of your resolve. And it's the spark to have discipline to our routine. Routine means it's built in. There's no variance. It becomes automatic and mechanical. Because once you've established your resolve, you make this space part of your routine. That you become disciplined in the percentage that you want to have between these two lines. That's what the ant would do. And this is where that routine begins. In an ideal world, you have to ask the question, what would I want this margin number to be? 5%, 10%, 20% of this green line. What would you like it to be? I'm not just asking. As you're watching, I just dare you to decide and to be specific. I get it. I don't understand your financial situation, but I'm asking you right now to write down a number. This is what we're going to call that number. We're going to call it your peace percentage. It's this gap, right? Hang on to that number. We're going to revisit it in just a moment. So we have resolve. Then we establish what's going to be our routine. And then finally, the last step is we have a recipe. Now, this is where my wife gets crazy, because in our house, she's the keeper of the recipe. And I'm not saying you should do this or anything like this, but you need to do something. She's got her own spreadsheet. She's got those Dave Ramsey FPU envelopes. When we get paid and the green goes up, she still goes to the bank, and the teller looks at her funny, and she withdraws cash and she sticks it in those envelopes. And she's got those envelopes in her wallet, which always gets some interesting looks when we're at Trader Joe's. She pulls out the envelope. But here's why we need to do this. Because in our marriage, things used to be crazy and filled with panic in our early. You remember the cloud I mentioned at the beginning? Well, we lived under that cloud, but early in our marriage, in our lives together, we also had what was known as the call. It went hand in hand with the cloud. The call would usually happen the day or so after we got paid. And it would most likely consist of her in a panic and usually in tears, explaining how broke we were even though we had just gotten paid. And let me tell you, when you get the call one too many times and you've lived under the cloud one too many times, you resolve to establish a routine with a specific recipe for financial peace. So now we have money meetings, and they're much calmer. Sure, occasionally there are moments of tension when I want something or she wants something, or when we had two kids that were in college at the same time and we're trying to pay that off, or maybe like right now when there's a global pandemic, there's an unexpected crisis. But these things make maintaining the gap between the green line and the red line, it makes it difficult for sure, but it can be done. But you have to be as determined as you can be to live like an ant and not be a fool. So let me give you, before we wrap up, a basic, simple starting point as you build your recipe for financial peace. And if you follow this, I believe God's honored. It's biblical, and your quality of life will increase, leading to a more peaceful and, again, a more generous life. That's our goal, right? To be able to give and give and give. John Wesley, famous theologian, he said this: make all you can, save all you can, give all you can. That's a great plan, but it's lacking a few specifics, so let me help, and we're going to use some sugar cubes to kind of get an image of that. So here we are, some mixing bowls and some sugar cubes. First of all, the sugar cubes. These represent your income. For some of us, it's like this. For some of us, it's like this. For some of us, it's a little less. Doesn't matter. The principle still applies that I want to share with you. So let me give you the principle first and then break it down. We're going to start with the eternal. We're going to save for the future. We're going to set aside our margin, and we're going to spend the rest. So this is the eternal. And for the eternal, if this is our income, we're going to take a percentage of everything that we make. And we've learned this principle over the last few weeks. And this first percentage goes to things that are eternal, things that are bigger than you, greater than you, things that will impact, that will even outlive you. And a great biblical benchmark to establish is the first 10%. It's an eternal investment that you will make. It began in the Old Testament, and it's a great goal to get to, or even today I would challenge you to start from. But the idea is to set a percentage for the eternal. Proverbs, there's Proverbs again, says, honor God with everything you own. Give him the first and the best. That's where we begin with our income, that green line. The next percentage, that 10%, should go to our future. So we take 10% more of what we had. That's what you put away and you lock it up. Because when you give a percentage of your income to the future, you're saving, you are investing in your future self. And like the ant, we can't control everything that's going to happen in this life or to our finances. But what we can do is set aside money for our future. So you basically pay your future self a percentage. Now, this is hard in a culture so obsessed with the now, the things we want right now, not necessarily the things we need. They will constantly be stealing from this future bucket, from the future you. But if you can set your resolve, develop this routine, and stick to this recipe, your future self will thank your present self, okay? The third bowl is the peace bowl. This is the number that you decided on earlier. It's the percentage of your present resources, right? After your eternal that you've given and your future responsibilities that you will set aside. And it's our margin. It's what you decided on earlier, whatever it is, 5%, 10%, 20%. And here's what's awesome. Once you have done that, the rest is available towards the today, the present. This is what you have left to set your standard of living correctly and to meet the responsibilities of your life, as well as to enjoy life. It's all your bills, your food, your mortgage. It's the money that you have to enjoy your life responsibly. And then you have a recipe for financial freedom and financial peace. You start with the eternal. You build for your future self. You set aside that margin that will give you peace, the difference between the green line of income and the red line of debt. And then you enjoy your life, the quality of your life. And this is a recipe with resolve, with routine. This is a recipe that will lead us to a place where we can be generous, where we can give, where we can be the people financially that God wants us to be. It's choosing the path of the ant, not the way of the fool. And I know what some of you are thinking. Lee, I don't know if I can do that because I would have to change my standard of living. Yep. But by doing this, you will actually increase your quality of life, especially your spiritual life, because the state of your finances can bring havoc to our spiritual lives. The writer of Hebrews says it this way: keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you had, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. And then you can drive around seeing things and saying, I could buy one of those, but I'm not going to. Or I could lease one of those, but I'm not going to. Or I could borrow enough money to live in one of those, but I'm not going to. I could. Why? Because I would rather be free and have peace than that new house or that new truck or that new anything. And listen, today, here at Centerset, I want you to experience that kind of peace and freedom. The only words I can think to say to you if you've been handling your finances in such a way that your standard of life is high and your quality of life is low are these two words: stop it. I know, spiritual. Stop it. God is inviting you into this. Imagine if you had been doing this for the last 30 years or 20 years or 10. If you had made a decision to live like an ant with a definite direction for your finances. Imagine what that could be like, and then start now. Start now, the next paycheck. When you're dumping your income into those bowls, money, you begin to say, money, you don't own me anymore. You're not going to be my master. I'm not going to be your slave, because at the end of the day, it's not the amount that matters. It's the management that makes all the difference. So listen, when we resolve to live with the necessary routine based on a recipe, a clear recipe, guess what? We can totally raise the quality of our lives. And then all of this generosity that we've talked about, where we can learn together to give and to be able to push the agenda of the kingdom of God forward, that we in the San Jose area can begin to give towards raising the level of resources of Centerset Church, so that we together as a church can go forward in the next few months and over the next few years. As people in need continue to emerge and our city is in need, we're going to be positioned because of resources, yours, mine, and others, to be able to impact in a powerful way. Let me just close by praying with you and for you that God will use you and the resources that He's given you to steward in a powerful way. Father, we thank you for the fact that you have provided resource, that you have given us resource to use that's yours, that you've placed in our hands. And God, I pray that those are listening today, that they would have that resolve, that they would establish that routine, and they would use a recipe that could bring them to a place of peace. God, a place of pure peace. And that, God, we would be a generous people, that we would be disciplined in seeing what we have just as yours, that it's temporarily ours to give and to be used for the furtherance of your kingdom. God, we ask these things in your name. Amen.
Church, I hope that message left you feeling refreshed and encouraged to start a new week. We love you and we look forward to seeing you next week. Be blessed, church.